welcome, Dr. Dave.
My pleasure to be here. Absolutely.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yes. So we're talking about the Kingdom Ministry Training Manual. Obviously, you've had quite the journey as it relates to ministry, and you've written a lot of books. But this has come at this season in your ministry. You're, 10 years in as a senior pastor.
11.
11 years in as the senior pastor of Bahamas Faith Ministries. And you're deep in your journey. And it seems like at this point you're looking back. And this was very important to you to create. So tell us a little bit about why now.
Well, the interesting thing about the Kingdom Ministry Training Manual is that I didn't intend to write it initially. But I realized that we had a number of persons in the ministry. It had been at least 10 years since we had had an ordination. And we had a number of new people coming into the ministry. And I realized that one of the things that the Bible says is that the purpose of the leadership of the church is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. So I said, you know what? We need to equip these new people and persons who weren't ordained before into what is needed and what are the components, what's necessary to be proficient in sharing the gospel and in serving in ministry. And as I begin to explore materials that I can use for training, I realized that there weren't materials that were kingdom-based. We had a lot of ministry training materials, but I knew that I wanted the training to happen from a kingdom perspective. And so as I began to scour the internet and scour resources, I said, you know what, I'm going to have to write this myself because what I'm looking for, I don't see. So I sat down and I started to put the course together. I started doing my PowerPoints. And as I began to do my PowerPoints, I realized not only do I need to present it in PowerPoint format, but if you're going to train people, they need training material. And then, people have been asking me over the years, do you have ministry training material? So those are the elements that brought me to the point where I said, I need to write it. So I wrote it, and it's serving as the basis for training in our ministry and many other ministries around the world.
You mentioned the fact that, you were able to find certain ministry training material, but you couldn't find kingdom-based ministry training material. What is it that separates the Kingdom Vantage Point from other ministry?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And the truth of the matter is that most church material is church-based. Now, that sounds like that's a positive thing. And it's not a negative thing. But what happens is that when it's church-based, then people don't understand the role of the church because the church becomes the entity. But in this manual, what I explain is that the church is an agency of the kingdom. So what the church is doing is serving as the agent to introduce people to the kingdom. And we need to make it about the kingdom and understand that the church is not the end. The church is the means to get to the end. And a lot of persons in ministry, one of the things that's happened that I say in the training manual is that when we take elements of the kingdom and we don't understand those elements in the whole, then they become monuments. So for example, baptism is an ordinance of the church. It's not a church.
Yeah.
Now we have made it a church.
Yeah.
But we have made it a church because we haven't seen the kingdom. If we saw the kingdom, then we realize, okay, baptism is a part of the church.
Yeah.
Speaking in tongues is a part of the church. Faith is a part of the church. So we have churches named after elements of the kingdom.
Yeah.
So what this book does is it brings everything in perspective. It brings it all under one roof, and it aligns into the purpose of God. The way God described it, he said, the purpose of the church is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. The purpose of the leadership of the church But sometimes we don't understand the purpose of the church. We think the church is the end. The church is actually representing the kingdom on earth and is supposed to point people to the kingdom. But if the church doesn't understand the kingdom and we don't begin from a kingdom perspective, then we have a fractured methodology where we are focusing in on different elements of the church as opposed to focusing on the kingdom and the church as the agency that causes the kingdom to happen on earth.
I see that part of the tagline is equipping all leaders and believers for spirit-led service. What is spirit-led service in your opinion?
Well, spirit-led service is service that is under the authority of the Spirit of God. It is kingdom service, but we know that the Spirit of God is the illuminator. He's the comforter. He's the advocate. He's the guide. And so when you are operating under the Spirit, then it means that you are operating under the authority of God and you're operating under kingdom authority.
That is incredibly important. I think it's really interesting that you talked about the fact that this material is equipping the saints, right? Because when people think of the phrase ministry, they think of ministers. They think of people with a title. They think of pastors. They think of deacons. They think of elders. They think of the people in the worship ministry. But it really seems like you're casting a more broad net with this.
Yes. Well, the thing about churches is that people are still trying to go to church. And one of the things that I began this training manual, I said, look, we need to stop going to church. Now, if you go into a church and there's a pastor there and you say to the pastor and you tell the people, okay, now I want you to stop going to church, they'll get pretty angry. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is there's no such thing as going to church.
Yeah.
The word church comes from the word ecclesia, which means a called out people or those who are summoned. So you can't go to a summoned. The summoned are called, and then the Bible says the ecclesia is supposed to go into the world. So we have to get it in the right perspective, because if we don't get it, then it creates some confusion. Now, what happens is when people don't understand that they are the church, then they go to church. And when they go to church is where the problem starts, because you can go to a game, you can go to a party, you can go to a concert, but you cannot go to church. Yeah. So what they do is every Sunday, in their minds, they go to church. What they mean is that they are going to the temple or the embassy or the place where the church gathers. But in their minds, they are going to church. So when you go to church, like you go to a game, you go and you watch the performers and you clap if they do good, you boo if they do bad. And then you go home, and then next week, you go back to church. But when you are the church, then you come to the temple for a different purpose. You come to the house of worship or the temple or the embassy to get brief for your assignment. And that's what really is supposed to happen when people come into the house of God every Sunday or whatever they enter the house of God. They are supposed to go there to be equipped. Your work actually begins on Monday, because Sunday is a briefing day. Yeah. You are getting instructions. You are learning changes or adjustments in strategies. You are learning more intricate information about kingdom policy. So when you look at it from that perspective, then you don't have people going to church every Sunday and just going about life and not doing anything. When you understand that you are the church and you go to the house of worship to get brief for your assignment, then on Monday you start saying, okay, now I have to go to work. I have to do the work of the church. What we have also seen is that the people who go to church, they become fans. They become church fans. So they watch the pastor perform. They watch the elders perform, and they are not in the game. Yeah,
I was going to say too. They are. I've seen quite a few church people who are experts, like the sports analysts too. Like, okay, how was this Sunday? Well, I would give the worship a 3 out of 10.
Right.
X, Y,
because they are fans. Yeah. And we need to get rid of church fans. And people have to understand that the purpose of the church is to equip the saints, which means all believers. It should be really equip the ecclesia for assignment. And so that's how this training manual may differ from other manuals. Now, maybe there's a manual that has that perspective, but I haven't seen any. Most of them that I have seen are still going to church base.
So, again, we're talking about every person realizing that they have a ministry. It may not be a formal ministry. And there's different levels of formal ministry, whether it be ministry of helps, whether it be the nursery, whether it be children's church, X, Y, and Z. Everyone is a minister in their own right. How is this going to transform ordinary volunteers into kingdom leaders?
Well, that's a good question. To say that you have to go and find a ministry means that you don't understand the kingdom. Let me give you an example. Every person who goes to church, they go to work. So when you go to work, it means that that is your field of ministry, because that is where you are gathered. Where you gather with people. Now, you don't have to be trained, you don't have to go to seminary to find your coworker and say to them, is there something I can pray with you about this week? If you do that simple thing, then it means that you are operating in your ministry assignment. My job as a leader, as a pastor, teacher, prophet, apostle, so on, is to equip you so that you can be effective on the ministry that God already gave you. But if you are looking for a call, and you see a lot of people are looking for a call, but the call is past tense. God called us a long time ago. When he said ecclesia, it means everybody's called. Now, not everybody knows what their specific assignment is, but the leadership in the church is supposed to train people to help them to identify their assignment and then to equip them for their assignment.
I remember a conversation or someone actually who presented at chapel when I was in ORU, and he said, a lot of people are looking for a call, but the need is the call. If you see a gap, if you see people who are unserved, if you see people who are hurting, if you see people who are struggling, the need is the call. The fact that you've noticed a need in the world, that is a call to do something about it.
Well, let me add to that. Anytime you see a problem, that's a call. And if the problem irritates you, that's a double call. It means you are supposed to solve it. Because a lot of times people see a problem and then they say, okay, somebody needs to do something about it. But the reason that you are upset about it is because it's part of your assignment.
Right. You are somebody who should be doing something about it. Okay, so we talked about high level, what the book is all about and who the book is for. But talk to me about the meat of the book. What are some of the topics that you discussed in depth?
Well, we begin by talking about what is the church. And then we talk about what is the kingdom. And then we talk about what is ministry in the kingdom, how ministry takes place, what are the things you need to do, you need to know to be effective in ministry. And then we also talk about some of the don'ts. And we talk about, for example, character. We talk about how to represent the kingdom of God in the earth. So there's quite a variety of topics. We talk a little bit about the early church. So, for example, one of the things in the book is showing how the ministry elements came about in the church. So, for example, it says in the book of Acts that there was an argument between the Jewish widows and the Greek widows. And they were arguing about each other, and they were complaining that the apostles were looking after the Jewish widows, but were not looking after the Greeks. And so there was this argument going on. And so the apostles came together and they said, you know what? Why are we sitting here mediating an argument about people being served? Our role is really the word and prayer. And so they said, let us find spirit-filled persons and let us appoint them to handle these types of issues and to handle this type of service in the kingdom. And that's where deacons were born. And so what we talk about is we talk about the difference between an elder, the difference between a deacon, and many other positions, pastors, deacons, ministers. So we are able to identify for the person who's coming to the training, okay, what is your role? Mm-hmm. So for example, there may be persons in the training who are ushers, and they may be saying, well, should I be ordained as a pastor? Should I be ordained as a minister? No, you should be ordained as a deacon because you are serving. And so those are some of the key elements in the book.
You know, I really think that this is going to be a powerful tool for people, even if only to be a wake-up call for the fact that everyone has a role to play. And like you mentioned, you know, you have the deacons for the different work. In the modern day church, I feel like there's a growing conversation, especially because people are more open about what they go through and their struggles. A lot of pastors are really burnt out because they find themselves being the whole team when in reality, they're supposed to be the coach, charging up the team.
Right.
But they're out, they're playing every position. They're visiting the sick, they're delivering meals, they're obviously visiting grieving people, marrying people, training them, all those things. When there are other people within the ministry who really need an opportunity to shine. And I think what's very interesting is sometimes when new people get activated, then you realize they had all of these gifts that they had to offer. So would you say that this training manual helps people identify their gifts or where they should be in the ministry?
Well, I think it solves a major problem because a lot of people who are going to church, and as I said, you can't go to church, they are asking the question, what can the church do for me? And how can the church cater to me? Because they are still calling it the church. Mm-hmm. If you are looking for the church to do something for you, you already missed it.
Yeah.
Because you are the church. Mm-hmm. What you need to say is, how can I be equipped to serve in my area of assignment? So we try to dispel that misconception and try to get people to understand that the church is not here to cater to you. The church is here to equip you so that you can be released into your assignment. The reason that we have so many people complaining about church is because they are still waiting to go to church and they are still waiting for the church to do something for them. You know what Jesus told the disciples? He said, if you love me, you'll feed my sheep. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of people who come into church every week, they lifting up their hands, I love you, Lord, and then you're not feeding a sheep. Mm-hmm. So it means that you don't understand your assignment.
That is so powerful. So you mentioned the fact that this is something that you would have used, you know, internally as a resource that you created to train persons within the BFM family, so to speak. What's been the reaction so far?
Well, it's been powerful. You know, everyone who was in the training, it was just amazing, the reaction and the response. So basically, when we started to put the training together, you know, I wanted to train as many of our leaders as possible. And what was surprising to me is that, you know, I think when we started to reach around the 100 mark, I said, well, okay, I guess, you know, that's a good number. But then people started calling and saying, well, no one invited me. And can I come? And then we had people show up who weren't invited. And so we ended up incorporating people. And then the people who came, they said, this is so good because it shows us exactly what we are supposed to be doing and how we can serve. And then, you know, a lot of the things that I explained about church, persons attending the courses, they said, you know, I never heard this before, which is amazing, you know, because I mean, as long as we have been around and as long as you've heard things about church and ministry, these should not be novel ideas. But persons were saying, you know, I never heard it explained like that. And it really released a lot of people and gave a lot of people impetus to serve. And so, you know, I'm really happy about that.
I love that. So, obviously, again, this is a valuable piece of information. This is something that you've put together over many years. What is the book counter? Where are we at on the number of books that you've written so far?
This is number 23.
Number 23.
Yes.
Would you say that this references material from any of the other books that you would have written over the years?
It has some material from a number of books, but most of the information is pretty unique to this assignment. This has some elements of Kingdom Ambassadors in it. It has some elements of leadership, my leadership, Transformational Leadership book, and other books, but a lot of it is new because this is the first book that I've written that's exclusively ministry based.
I was in church Sunday past, and there was a group of people who I think were left off the original ordination process, and so they were able to have that very special moment then, and an even bigger group overall was ordained. How did it feel to take that group, through the process? You were able to train them because now you've created a resource that maybe somebody else can use. Maybe next year you won't be teaching it. You'll be doing something else. How does it feel to have walked with them through this process? And for, I guess, them to be I don't want to say guinea pig, but for them to be the beta test group of this experience?
It actually exceeded my expectations. I wanted to get people trained. I wanted to get people in a position to be ordained, but the response has been overwhelming. Persons have expressed gratitude. They have really appreciated the training. They've been excited about it, and they feel like they have been empowered. Because a lot of times, persons in ministry, they keep trying to figure out, well, what can I do? Through this series, people have been equipped to understand that it doesn't have to be some magnanimous task that you have to do. Mm-hmm. It could be just going to work and praying for somebody. Yeah. It could be just sharing something on Facebook or YouTube or WhatsApp. Mm-hmm. So, I think a lot of people have been empowered and released into ministry effectively.
You touched on a real challenge, I want to say, in the Western world as it relates to the church, which is a very consumer-based mentality. If you talked about the early church, it was more of a group of people who were passionate, who they met together a lot. But like you said, to go out, to do things, to do ministry. How are we fighting that in 2025? Especially as I feel like we get more and more all about me, all about my comfort, all about my convenience. How do we, I guess, galvanize the people who are the church to do the work?
Well, we have moved from iPhone to iPad to iChurch. The church is I. And the church is not I. This is not an I church. So I think we have to fight I shouldn't say fight. We have to educate people on the purpose of the church and their role in the church, which is what this is all about. And once people get information and knowledge and revelation, it creates transformation. So we are seeing people who are transformed because they have received information that has expanded their knowledge of the kingdom and how the church and the kingdom operate together. A number of persons have come to me and they said, now I understand the purpose of the church. Mm-hmm. And so, so that's really heartwarming to me that people are getting it.
Again, you're past 20, you're approaching 30 books. This is writing is something that you're very passionate about. You've been communicating a lot of very important messages. For somebody who's not familiar with you, who are you to be writing this ministry training manual? What makes you an expert on this? Talk a little bit about your experience in ministry, or your stripes, if you will.
Well, I have a lot of mileage under my belt. I began as co-founder of Bahamas Faith Ministries with Dr. Monroe. I served as the first youth pastor. I evolved from being a youth pastor to a youth ministry and family ministry specialist. I began to travel the world, and as time went on, I expanded into leadership, into many other aspects of ministry. And with the passing of Dr. Monroe, then I have had to take on the role of senior pastor, which was a new role, but I'm 11 years in, and I've learned a lot. My knowledge has expanded in terms of serving in that arena. And so it's more than just an ordinary qualification. Like you said, I have stripes. I have stripes in the kingdom for a long time. The youth ministry, the leadership, family, business, all of these elements have come together to make who I am.
And when it comes to equipping people for ministry in broad terms, are there any sections of the book that actually speak to the day-to-day logistics of any part of ministry?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that we do is we differentiate on the roles of different aspects of the ministry. So, what is a pastor supposed to do? For example, the word pastor comes from the Greek word pascher, which means to feed and to protect. So we talk about what is the role of a pastor. Then we talk about what is the role of a deacon versus an elder. And all of those things need clarification, because sometimes if people don't understand their role, what is the role of a minister versus a deacon? You know, a deacon, and these roles overlap, but we're talking about primary roles. So for a deacon is somebody who serves in logistics type, the logistics area of ministry. So you may be an usher. You may be someone who's working in the background in the tech team. So you're serving the logistics of the ministry, whereas a minister is serving people. You're ministering to people. So simple things like that, it helps people identify where they fit, and it helps them to understand how to serve effectively.
When you talked a little bit about deacon, I realized, a lot of people fit in that space of being a deacon, but sometimes, especially for people in my generation, titles are scary. Titles are uncomfortable. I guess they come with a sense of commitment, but they also feel very heavy. And I can't help but think of some of the things that you recalled, when you were getting started out in ministry. I think you resisted the title of pastor for quite some time. What would you say to somebody who wants to serve, or who even is serving, but they don't necessarily want to be formally ordained? They don't feel that they are lofty or spiritual enough to be called a deacon.
Well, I did resist being ordained. I fought it vociferously. I remember Dr. Monroe used to sit me down on a regular basis and say, "Okay, Dave, it's time for you to be ordained." And I was like, I used to call him Chief. I say, "Chief, it's not for me. I don't want any titles." And then I remember one day he pulled me into his office, and he had it by then, because I was doing ministry, but I didn't want a title. And so he put me in his office, and he said, "Dave, I need to ask you a question." He said, "Do you pray for people?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you preach?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Do you counsel?" And then he went through this list. And so he said, "Okay, you are a pastor."
Like, give it up.
Those are things that pastors do. He said, "Now, let's stop fighting it. We got to get you ordained." And that's how I got ordained. So in this book, I help people to eliminate going through that. Help them to identify what is the role of each area of ministry. There are people who are deacons who are trying to be prophets. And if you don't understand your role, you can be operating in the wrong area. So this book helps people to identify where they're supposed to be.
You talked about, wanting to be in a position that you aren't necessarily supposed to be in. Do you feel like people finding their space, finding that sense of purpose, finding that sense of fulfillment, do you think that would take away from a lot of that? Because those issues tend to spur a lot of infighting. Well, I want to be the leader of the women's ministry officially, or I want to be, the children's pastor X, Y, and Z. I think when people find a space, a niche that is just for them, could that give them that sense of meaning so that everyone can kind of get along?
When you don't know your role, you create a role that makes you famous. So, if you don't understand what a bishop is, if you don't understand what an apostle is, and it sounds attractive, you say, man, I could take that title and I'll be famous.
That sounds like fun.
So now you have where if you have 2 members, you're a bishop. If you have 5 members, you're apostle. If you have 20 members, you could be the Pope. So when people
most reverend.
Yeah, most reverend, holy, your grace, your thunder rebel high. So when people can get an understanding of what their real role is and what are the specific job descriptions for each assignment, then they can figure out where to fit better. And when you figure out where to fit, you can serve better. But if you are in the I church and you are looking not to serve, but you are looking to be famous, then you can pick a title. But when you understand your role in ministry, then you fit into where God assigned you to, and then you function effectively.
People find themselves in all kinds of different seasons of life. And when you think about ministry, even me specifically, over the last few years, I got married, I started a family, started a business. The dynamics of my life really shifted substantially. And I found myself with less time to invest in formal ministry. And, people can say, oh, your family is your first ministry, X, Y, and Z. But you can feel like, I'm not doing the formal work. I'm not out there. I'm not on flyers. I'm not necessarily face to face with young people like I was. Or if I think of, somebody who may be a med student in the thick of it, overwhelmed, or a mom who has 4 kids right now. What do you say to the person who cannot necessarily commit to a formal ministry? How do they do ministry on a day-to-day in the season that they're in?
Well, ministry goes in stages. The first stage is who's close to you. Everybody has someone close to them. And so you have a ministry that's waiting for you every day, the people who are close to you. And sometimes we feel like we personally have to do the work of the ministry, which is why a lot of people, when they do evangelism, they actually make a mistake. So people feel like they have to get people saved and get people into the kingdom. And God never gave anybody that responsibility. He said, if I be lifted up, I will do the drawing. Your only job is to talk about God. The rest of the results are left to Him. You talk to people and you say, look, I want to tell you about God. Let me tell you about my testimony. Let me tell you what happened in my life. And if you'd like to receive Him, I'll pray with you. You don't have to force anybody. Yeah. Once you start speaking the word, then Jesus said, the Holy Spirit goes into action and does the work. Yeah. So we don't have to do work. All we have to do is just tell people. He said, go out and make disciples. So you find somebody and you tell them, the most effective ministry that has ever happened with me is when I tell people about my story.
Yeah.
Because when I tell people about my story, then they say, oh, if he can change, then maybe I can change. And then people get curious. And as they get curious, you just tell them. And then you say, hey, by the way, if you want me to pray with you, I'll pray with you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a hard sell. We feel like we have to pull a gun on people. Okay, now it's time to get saved.
Today.
If you don't get saved, you're going to go to hell. And you don't want to go to hell. And then we start, pressuring them.
We become very aggressive.
And pressuring them is not what we were told to do.
Yeah.
We said, lift him up. He said, be light, be salt, lift him up, and then he'll do the drawing. So we just make ourselves accessible. And if you look at the ministry of Jesus, Jesus never went at people with a hard sell. The first thing he did is he built a relationship. And he built relationships around what people were already doing. So when he met Peter, Peter was a fisherman. He talked about fish. Peter became a friend. And then he invited his friend on a journey. And that's what we're supposed to do.
So important. I'm so encouraged by this conversation. I feel like I'm halfway through the book, but I know it's going to have a lot of really incredible material. Now, we are broadcasting to a live audience, but we are recording in the Bahamas. And in the Bahamas, people have very simple questions. Number one being, how much does the book cost? So what is the cost of the book and where can people purchase it?
The book is $25. In the Bahamas, it can be purchased from right here at Bahamas Faith Ministries, our bookstore. It can also be purchased from One Rib Publications on Robinson Road. And then for our global friends, it can be purchased through Amazon or through my website, davidburrowsinternational.com. So there's several options.
All right. So, this is an incredible resource. We've talked about your experience. We've talked about what it can do, obviously who it's for, which really seems like everyone, because we are all a part of the ministry experience. And so I know I'm excited. I'm sure that I'm going to go home with a copy tonight. And I'm sure that I can get an autographed copy, pulling the special strings that I have. But I just want to say kudos to you on this 28th. You said 28 book. This is
23rd.
Your 23rd book.
Yes.
Kudos to you on your 23rd book, which I think is incredibly important and it's going to do a world of good.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me to tell us all about it.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
And we are so happy that you are still with us. Now we're going to check out a video from our ministry training and ordination installation.
Some people get confused and they think that they are working for the pastor. They think they are working for the church. They think they are working for the man's ministry leader. You are working toward his name. And you have an individual assignment and you are accountable to him. Even though you are accountable to your immediate leader in your area of ministry, ultimately you are serving toward his name. In that you have ministered to the saints and do minister. So it's telling us that we are supposed to be involved in ministry.
Beloved, let us love one another. For love is of God, and everyone who is born of God knows God. He who does not love does not know God, for God is love. So that's my foundation. If I were writing a paper, that's my thesis statement. That God is love. His essence is love. And so I feel that in order to minister to anybody, in order to minister to your family, you need to have love.
I don't know about you, but I'm telling you what, there's a sound in the Bahamas. Put your hands together right now. I believe there's a sound, and I believe, come on, give God praise. There's a new sound. Come on, there's a new sound coming to the Bahamas.
Welcome back to our live launch of the Kingdom Ministry Training Manual, an incredible resource that we believe is going to empower believers from all walks of life to walk into their God-given ministry. And speaking of believers in God-given ministry, we are joined by none other than Pastor Angie Burrows, the wife of our illustrious author, who just also happens to be my mother as well. Pastor Angie, how did it feel to see this new resource go out into the public?
I had some feelings that I didn't know were there. You have some emotions. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things I felt initially was awe and humility. Mm. Because sometimes you think you know a person, and we take people for granted, and we become too familiar. I knew Pastor Dave was a man passionate about the things of God, but I didn't know that he would be passionate to the point of writing a manual, because he had discussed with me or shared with me some of his frustration of not finding material that was suited to our ministry.
Mm-hmm.
There was material.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that persons hadn't written books, but he wanted something specifically tailored to this ministry. And so he decided to write a book, do research, take the time, and put it together instead of complaining
Mm-hmm.
and saying there's nothing out there. And so I found that, again, very humbling, and I was in awe. And it was also inspiring for me to know that God has put something on the inside of all of us,
Mm-hmm.
that if you don't see what you're looking for, perhaps you are the person who is supposed to create that thing so that someone else who's looking for what you're looking for will have that asset.
Now, were you a part of this recent training experience?
Yes, I was.
Obviously, Pastor Dave mentioned that he would have had years, decades in the ministry and created this resource based off of that experience. Well, it just so happens that you were alongside him in that experience. Were you still able to gather something, or were you still able to glean, to grow, to learn from this resource?
Oh, definitely. Because I realized there's a saying I heard, I can't remember who started it, but many persons have since coined it, that you're never too old to learn. But I also felt like you never know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did learn some new things, and there was illumination of other things for me as well. So I love the illumination because each writer, each speaker, two of us can look at the same thing, but each writer and each speaker sees something different, even if it's slightly different. And so for me, he illuminated or drew out more clearly some things that I would have overlooked.
I think you are chief among people to say, "Oh, I know Pastor Dave." I think it's fair to assess that you probably know him better than anyone else in the world at this point. You spent quite a bit of time with him. I want to say more than half of your life, and yet you were able to glean something from this
Yes.
experience. So, what do you say to the people who? I've gone to BFM for years. I've listened. I listen to Pastor Dave every Sunday. I don't need a resource like this. I know what to do. Or I've been doing ministry for 10 years. Why would I need a training manual on something that I've already been doing? What would you say to them?
I would say that there's a person who's a beautiful designer. There's a person who's a beautiful hairdresser or beautician, or a person who's naturally good at baking a cake. But I feel if you were to take a course in cake baking, it makes you that much better because you understand some scientific things about baking that perhaps you would not have learned had you just continued baking. And so I know that's talking about food, and then we're talking about spiritual food. But I think if you were to take that approach, you're saying that I am omnipotent. I'm all powerful and I'm omniscient. So I'm all powerful and I know everything as well. And that is called pride. So I would really discourage persons from taking that approach and encourage them. Read the book, because there's something in that book perhaps you knew, but it would clearly explain it or better explain it so that you're able to intelligently share it with someone else.
And finally, for those who think maybe I'll be a deacon, or maybe I just work in the nursery. I don't need a training manual on how to sing "Yes, Jesus Loves Me." What do you say to the person who feels like their role is not sufficiently significant to need a training manual like this?
Well, first of all, let me just speak to the need that their role is not significant. Whatever God has called a person to is significant. So because God has called you to something, it's not insignificant. It means that it's important for you to be trained. So I would dismiss that question. I would not entertain it for a moment. Everyone who's in ministry should get the manual. And we're not trying to sell books, but we want to empower persons. And so I would encourage each person to get a book.
I love it. We are empowering persons to do the work of the ministry just like we're supposed to. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And thank you for watching. We're going to take a quick break and be right back.
Senior Pastors Dr. Dave and Angela Burrows, Fellowship Pastors Kirsch and Suzette Darville invite you to join us at Bahamas Faith Ministries International in beautiful Nassau, Bahamas every Sunday at 10 a.m. for our weekly Kingdom Celebration worship experience. Join us at the Embassy for our weekly briefing, transformational teachings designed to uplift and empower your life, dynamic praise and worship led by Crown Worship, and so much more. Bahamas Faith Ministries is a multi-generational church with multi-generational leaders. We exist to transform followers into leaders and leaders into agents of change. And we have a place here for everyone, children, youth, and adults. So join us on Sundays at 10 a.m. online or at our Carmichael Road campus. We promise you, your life will never be the same.
Welcome back to all of you who have tuned in to this incredible conversation that we are having about the Kingdom Ministry Training Manual, equipping you for service, spirit-led service. And we've had such great conversation so far, just talking about, who this book is for, what it can do for your life, how it can help you and empower you to serve. I feel like we've had a very rich series of dialogue, obviously, about some of the challenges that we have in the church, as well as what this resource can do to point people in the right direction, right? Because you can't necessarily, if you say this, then everyone is going to do what they're supposed to do. But it is something that people can use as a tool. What are your final thoughts on this?
Well, I'm excited because, a number of persons have written to me over the years, and they said, is there any information available or any manuals available from a kingdom perspective? And so this answers that question. And I'm happy to have had the opportunity to do this, because this is one of the things that Dr. Monroe was planning to do. Because, he developed the International Association of Kingdom Churches and Ministries. And so his plan was to develop kingdom-based training material. And so I have had the opportunity to follow up on that vision that we had together. And I'm happy that persons have already benefited from it, persons who have received the manuals, they've been talking about it, people are asking about it, people are calling about it. And so I'm really excited. And I'm excited about the transformation that's going to take place. So I look forward to people figuring out what church is. And people stop going to church and start being ecclesia, the called out ones, the ones who are summoned.
So incredible. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. Just please remind us where people can purchase this resource and how much it costs.
Okay, the training manual is $25. It can be purchased locally here at Bahamas Faith Ministries in our bookstore, Oasis Bookstore. It can be purchased online at my website, davidburrowsinternational.com, or it can be purchased through Amazon. And it's in Amazon as ebook and a physical book. And very shortly, it should also be an audio book. But if you Google Kingdom Ministry Training Manual / David Burrows, it's available there on Amazon.
This is excellent. I'm so excited for this to go out to the people who need it, for the people who it's going to equip, like you said, to do the work of the ministry. And I want to say thank you for putting this out there. Sometimes people have knowledge and they think that in their humility that it's not necessarily worth sharing. So thank you for taking the time to put this together so you can share this with the world.
And let me say this too. If persons are purchasing for a church and they're purchasing in bulk, then it's better to contact me directly so that I can arrange a significant discount. But otherwise, if they're purchasing it individually, Amazon is fine or the website is fine.
And I'm like, this is a solid piece of material. Like, we have one here on the table. And $25 seems like the price is right. So if you can even get a discount, there's no excuse not to purchase this for your church group, for your ministry group, or just for yourself. So you definitely want to check out the Kingdom Ministry Training Manual. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening and sticking with us. And we hope to hear from you soon.
At Bahamas Faith Ministries, we believe giving is an essential part of our worship and our commitment to advancing the kingdom of God. We have provided several convenient and secure ways for you to give and support the vision. Here are 4 ways to give. Number 1, visit our website at www.bfmionline.com and simply click the Give button. Number 2, place your gift in the seed box at the Miles E. Monroe Diplomat Center in Nassau, Bahamas, the place where God lives. Number 3, give by direct deposit in the Bahamas. Our bank is Bank of the Bahamas. The account name is Bahamas Faith Ministries. The account number is 135-000-0886. Our branch is Shirley Street, branch number 03157. After making your transfer, kindly email proof of payment to give@bfmionline.com so our finance team can promptly confirm and record your deposit. Number 4, give by credit card in person at the Miles E. Monroe Diplomat Center. Thank you for your generosity and faithful support. Together, we are fulfilling our mission to impact lives, influence nations, and advance the kingdom of God.